Hello. No. Can y'all hear me in the back? Great. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first McCarthy Center Politics and a Pint of 19th school year. My name is Quinlan Marshall, and I am a student coordinator here in the McCarthy Center. I'm a junior biochemistry major and Hispanic studies minor. So tonight we are so excited to have Professor Bob Bell of the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University Accounting and Finance Department to talk about his world travels while living in Benedictine monasteries. No stranger to international travel, Professor Bell has visited over 50 countries, including 20 on his previous trip. A modern day Indiana Jones, he has no shortage of tall tales and close calls. And we will hear about some of those tonight. Our event will last approximately 1 hour, and we have complimentary pizza and refreshments over here. Now, as you may know, we live by the Benedictine values here, and one of those values is moderation. So taking 10 pieces of pizza does not constitute moderation. Just a thought, the pub is open for those of age. We have pieces of paper passed out if y'all have any questions, and just please hold the pieces of paper up and we'll have a volunteer or student coordinator to come and pick them up. If you'd like to know more about the McCarthy Center, how to get involved, or when our next events are, check us out on our Facebook page, website, and our office in Simons 136. You can add us on Instagram if you're into that. And without further delay, I would love to give Professor Bell a warm welcome and get this event started. So, one more thing too, before we had you enter, we had students enter their names for a gift bag, and I'm gonna do the drawing right now. If I call your name, I'll be over here with the bags. I have Gabriel Hentz. I think you get a signed copy of Bob's book, so. And then I have Mike Simpson. Mike Simpson. Great. The floor is all yours, Bob.
Okay, thank you so much for coming out. We got people on the upper level. I'm thrilled. A round of applause already. I didn't even do anything. So yeah, I'm going to try my best to keep it to an hour. Some people have to leave at 6, so I want to note that some people that leave aren't disgusted or bored with what I'm saying, that they've already told me they have to leave early. And we'll take questions at the end. So I'm going to move. I have about 200 slides that pictures really, that I'm going to go through and tell you a little bit of stories about the trip. And I'll start off with a little bit about me. I am a Johnny, and I originally from Pensacola, Florida. So I had never seen snow, never owned a real jacket or pair of gloves, but I came up to this school because a high school teacher's husband's friend had gone to St. John's. That's how much of a connection I had to this place. But I drove up here with my mom, and I fell in love with the place. It was the only place I applied to. Went back to Florida for my senior year. Came back as a first year, and during my first year, somebody put me in a full Nelson wrestling hold, just horse playing in the dormitory, and they broke my neck. And so I wasn't in a wheelchair when I came here, but I became a quadriplegic by way of a spinal cord injury. Spent about a year in hospitals, went back to Florida, started going to school at the University of West Florida, but my goal was to come back here to the place I started, to the place I love so much. And so I ended up coming back to St. John's in a wheelchair, and graduated only 1 year later than I should have. I graduated, I worked in public accounting, I went to law school, I worked in Washington, D.C. as a lawyer for the government. I went to New York, I worked on Wall Street as a lawyer. And then I decided, my real goal was to come back here and teach. Actually, when I graduated from law school, I told all my friends that I had a 10-year goal to come back here and teach. I asked my mom for a St. John's class ring for my graduation from the University of Minnesota and told all my friends that I was going to come back and teach. And I actually made it back within 9 years to teach. And so I took an over 85% pay cut to come back here and teach. And but I taught. I got tenure in 2016, and it was really one of those things that throughout this whole process, I've asked myself, why do I love these schools so much? Why do I love St. Ben's and St. John's so much? I don't like the cold at all. You know, why am I here? And so the reality was in 2016, I was thinking about the monastery, whether that was a calling for me, but I've always thought about why do I love St. Ben's and St. John's so much, and what is it about these schools? And it's certainly the Benedictine heritage, the Benedictine values we hear so much about. And so I started to think about doing this trip, and I love international travel. And with Brother Paul Richards, we started to come up with a plan of traveling the world and staying in Benedictine monasteries. And so that's really how this trip came about. And so, you know, I want to start off by thanking the schools for allowing me to do this. You know, I think they're practicing liberal arts education. I teach in accounting and finance. They don't have to grant you a sabbatical, but they saw the value in this and allowed me to do it. And then also there's you know, the question of, can I afford to do this? You know, I will say, you know, I put a lot of money into this. I had a lot of sold a lot of stocks, but I had a lot of benefactors who helped me as well, and a lot of them are here tonight. And you know, one of my key benefactors who believed in me early was also Dan Whalen, who's here tonight. It's a beautiful thing because he is the key benefactor to begin the McCarthy Center. So, you know, I spoke with Dan about an hour before, you know, about 2 weeks before leaving for this trip, and he believed in it, and he helped start something called a Faculty Student Research Fund. And so I can't thank Dan enough for that, and for what he's done for the McCarthy Center, and for what he's done for St. Ben's and St. John's. And well deserved. And you know, I think Eugene McCarthy would also be very proud of this trip as well, because in case you don't know, Eugene McCarthy entered the monastery, considered being a monk. He was a novice for about 9 months. And so I think he would be very proud that I took this trip and went on this exploration. So with that being said, this is Hannah and Piper. They were recent graduates. They graduated in 2016. And Hannah, the blonde, was a nursing major. And Piper was an integrated studies major. And she was thinking about physical therapy school. She'd actually gotten into the University of Minnesota, and then Hannah was going to take a job in Hawaii. And right after spring break, their senior year, I was originally looking for Johnnies to go on this trip with me, but I couldn't find any who I felt were a good fit. I wanted somebody who was going to help people with disabilities throughout their career and was doing it for the right reason. And so right after spring break, I chose Hannah and Piper, and we began this adventure together. The original plan was to go to about 12 countries. Dan Whalen told Matt Lindstrom that if I could accomplish half of that, meaning 6 countries, it was going to be an amazing adventure, and I ended up going to 20 countries. And so these are the 20 countries we went to. I went to Benedictine monasteries in 14 different countries. I was with Benedictine Volunteer Corps people. That St. John's has a volunteer corps program, and I visited them in 7 different countries, and you'll see more about them on the way. So there we are with our St. Ben, St. John's flags at the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport, beginning our journey. First country was Kenya, and we didn't have any BBC volunteers there at the time, but we have had them in the past. We stayed at the Amani Center and this is the St. Benedict's Church in Nairobi. There's the church. There's the inside. There's Brother Paul Richards. He began the journey with me. He flew to Nairobi to make sure everything was in order and that we were going to begin the trip in the right fashion. There's Piper with some of the children on the streets. One question you may end up asking me is, what was my favorite country? And there's different reasons for what would be our favorite, but I can tell you off the bat, out of 20 countries, the one country all three of us would say we would return to would be Kenya, and we would go to Nairobi. Because there's just so much need there. If you feel like you want to be of service, you want to help people, you can go to Nairobi, and they need your help. It's a situation where there's wonderful people, but this monastery is right on the edge of a very severe slum, the Mathare slum. And there's 450,000 children that live on the streets in Kenya, and 60,000 that live on the streets just in Nairobi. And these children are walking around, a lot of them that live on the streets, holding a bottle of glue to their nose and just sniffing it, or holding a rag to their face. And you would think to yourself, if you saw a 10-year-old sniffing glue and clearly, on drugs, you would stop them and say, put that bottle down. But there's another one 5 feet away, or another one right around the corner. And I think Brother Paul would say that it was one time in his life that he had a profound thing happen to him, and that we were in the slums one day. It was intense. People were surrounding us. I was trying to get out of the car, and it got a little hectic with people pushing. And Brother Paul literally stepped over a child who was in the gutter. And it kind of shook him up afterwards. We got inside. He's like, I cannot believe I just stepped over a child. And so Nairobi and the slums can be that intense, but there's so many opportunities for you to be of help. Here we are outside of a church in a suburb or about 3 hours away from Nairobi. This is actually James Camus' father right here, Peter Camus. James is in the back. He's a faculty resident, and he's also an IA. And this man has sent two people to St. Ben's and St. John's, James and his sister. His sister, Stella, is a Benny. And this is visiting people with disabilities. The reality of people with disabilities around the world is their parents abandon them, or they can't take care of them, or a lot of them are just killed at birth. And the lot that they have, these children live in this house that they can't really even hardly get out of it because there's rocks everywhere. But James Camus is doing this for giving them a life that they can at least try to go to school. And we were honored to be with them. There's Stella. Anytime there's Brother Paul Richards. He's not very happy, as always. This is the backyard at the Amani Center, so maybe a little different than you would think in Kenya. This is an avocado tree, and we would sit out there and eat avocados. Here we are at a school called St. Benedict's, which is in the Mathare slums. They take children off the street, let them go to, it's kind of a transition back into school. Here we are, anywhere we could, we tried to volunteer with children with disabilities. It's certainly a passion of mine, but the reality of it is, Hannah and Piper were 10 times better at it than I, as the way they were able to connect with children with disabilities or anyone with disabilities. Here children just laying in cribs, just piled in there. Our next country was Tanzania. You'll notice somewhat of a theme throughout the trip, and I'll take a Benedictine value to say all things in moderation. Yes, we tried to work hard, and yes, we did volunteering, but like I said, originally from Pensacola, Florida. We say world's widest beaches, and anytime I can go to a beach is a wonderful time for me. So this is actually in Zanzibar, which is an island outside of Tanzania. This is an epic picture, but for me it was wonderful because this was the first time that I realized that Hannah and Piper can pick me up, no problem. They just picked me up and dropped me into the Indian Ocean. So, you know, girl power, that women can do anything guys can do. And so now here we are it's called Amiliwaha. This is a Benedictine monastery about 10 hours outside of Dar es Salaam, the capital of Tanzania. And this with two Johnnies, Phil Evans and Adam Kolb. And so this is a place where 400 Benedictine sisters. And, you know, I use this as kind of the quintessential or a perfect example of what you can do for all you Johnnies and Bennies or anyone who think you can do something like this. We stayed there the first time for 3 weeks. We stayed there, and of course I'm paying for everything, but three meals a day, 3 weeks, 3 different rooms, 3 showers, and we're paying $10 a day. So if you ever want to travel, all these Benedictine monasteries have guest houses, and you can stay there. You can stay there inexpensively. And this was like having 400 mothers and grandmothers just doting on you. Here's the church. This is inside of the church. This is what they do. They make them have the children dress up. Here's the sisters. A lot of these children are orphans, and the sisters are taking care of them. I will say, Amiliwaha is freezing. You think that Africa is hot. Amiliwaha is one of the coldest places in Africa. But look at that. You're out there in the middle of nowhere. It's very, you know, a place of great reflection. It's, you know, beautiful. And you have this whole place to yourself.
Hello. Hello.
Hey. What? Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
You would never guess that we call that hello, baby. But they have an orphanage there. This is what I mean. You can be of service at these places. They have an orphanage there. They have a school. They have a clinic. So there's about 30 children who are there. All, you know, their parents had either died of AIDS or have HIV or for some reason couldn't take care of them. They told us when we were there that none of the babies had AIDS or HIV or TB. And about 2 weeks later, a child died of AIDS. And so we had to be careful, but just beautiful little children. They're well trained to, you know, appeal to the visitors and make you feel good about being there. This is a clinic right beside the orphanage, but imagine they have no electricity. And this is what they do to stay warm during the day. They leave their rooms and just sit out in the courtyard. If you ever are thinking, if you're pre-med or nursing, you know, you can go to a place like this and be of so much service and get so much experience. Anybody that thinks they want to volunteer or do something cool, these opportunities are available for you. Here's the women. You know, I love this picture or hate it at the same time, but this is what they have to do to have water in their schools. They have to walk about a half mile to go fill up buckets, and this is what's terrible about this. These are all the women going to get the water, and look at the guys over here just playing soccer. And that's unfortunately how it usually works. Here's some of the sisters literally cooking with fire. You know, they have some electricity, but they don't cook with electricity. Here we are at the clinic. They gave us some traditional garb when we left. This is Brother Stani. And so Hannah really helped them out a lot. She put all their medications in Excel and began an inventory program for them. And so here we are saying goodbye. Now, when we arrived there, the sister sang to us. And here we are leaving. Now this little next video has a cameo in it where the sisters just go wild. Get ready. Watch, she almost breaks my foot. She was a feisty one. So now here we are at a different monastery. We're now in Hunga. This guy right here, Pat Martin, he's in the audience. He was a BVC volunteer, and this is Franz Soro. He's now living in Atlanta. He has a wife and a child now. And so this was another Benedictine monastery we went to. This monastery is actually, many of you know Father Nick. This is where Father Nick and Father Lou felt like they found their vocations. And so we were at Amelia Waha for about 3 weeks. The first time we loved it so much we ended up going back. But here we stayed here for a month. You know, compared to Amelia Waha, we thought we were in the big city with this place. Here's, you know, this is the guest house, but here's the town. We hadn't seen a town like that, you know, for several weeks. But a lot of them had electricity, and there was a little place we could get soft drinks. We were actually there for an ordination. A lot of people that moved took their final vows or solemn vows, and they take it very seriously there. Wait till I show you this next video of the party. It was really like a 2-day party for this ordination. Hundreds of people come. They have this party that lasts from like 9 in the morning till 9 at night. People give gifts of cows, of chickens, they're carrying grain, they give money, they give suitcases full of clothes. These people have no money, but they're so proud that people are you know, committing a life of service and joining the monastery that they just absolutely are thrilled. This guy studied at the School of Theology here, and he was taking his solemn vows, I believe. There's Pat again. Pat seems to be in all our pictures. Here comes Franz. And this just goes on and on, like I said, for hours. There's Franz taught some of the guys some hip-hop dancing. Here we are I'm speaking at a school. This guy actually studied at St. John's as well. He's the principal of the school. But he wanted me to speak to these students because he said they've never really seen somebody outside the home in a wheelchair, and they think that people with disabilities can't do anything. He's told me they've probably never seen an educated person with a disability. And so I talked to those people about, you know, encouraging people they know with disabilities that they can get outside the home and to see them as people who can do things. This is outside of Dar es Salaam. We went there with Brother Dominic. So now we went to Rwanda. And this was actually the result of a St. John's graduate, and then his wife, Angie, if you've ever heard of Angie's Boom Chicka Pop, Dan Bastian and Angie Bastian started this, and they told me about going to see the gorillas in Rwanda. Everywhere we could, we tried to find Johnny's and Benny's. This is Emily and Jeff Cook, Lundergan. And we saw them. They're now in I think England, but they were in Kigali, Rwanda. So we went. There's only 300 there's only 900 mountain gorillas left in the world, and 300 of them are in Rwanda. And this is something that you should put on your bucket list. It's expensive, but to be with these gorillas. So they carried me up there on a stretcher. So this is 4 guys carrying me up. This guy carrying my wheelchair. That's my cushion. There's my armrest. But we're this close to mountain gorillas. We were with a family of 20. We were surrounded by these things. They could kill you at any second if they wanted to. But you have somebody there with a machine gun, And they, and when I show you a video, you're going to hear this sound of somebody going, "Rrr, rrr." And they were coming up and trying to touch me and touch my wheelchair. And they said that's never happened, but they had, of course, never seen somebody in a wheelchair before. And so they were just really curious about me. So they're, like, I can't believe this. So that's insane. Look at this. A baby. Now wait till you see this next picture. Everybody's going to go, oh. Yeah. We also saw a huge silverback. We were, from me to you, from a 1,000-pound silverback. So now we went to Zambia. The BBC volunteers all met up first in Livingston, and they went whitewater rafting, having a little bit of fun. My mom would say that all I do is take risks, and I have no sense at all. But at least I had enough sense not to get on this raft, So the guy in the wheelchair doesn't do everything everybody does. But if you ever, again, you young people, put it on your bucket list to go whitewater rafting down the Zambezi River. It is some of the best whitewater rafting in the world. Then we went to a monastery called Katabunga in Zambia. This is Michael Winlet and Rob Otterling. Forgot. I have it written down. Rob Otterling's got a hyphenated name. So all these BBC guys had graduated in 2016 as well, so that made it fun for Hannah and Piper to see this guy. Here's the church. Here's the inside of the church. That's the courtyard of St. Benedict. So very rural, no electricity, you Johnnies and Bennies. Look at this place. No screens, crowded in there. There I am in the back. But, eager to learn, thrilled to have this opportunity for someone to teach them. Here it is outside the monastery. I would push up and down here, and people would come and talk to me. A lot of people spoke English there. The BBC volunteers would teach the monks, teach them philosophy and some English, but there's a lot of opportunities for the BBC volunteers. This was a sister that we met representing my Collegeville shirt here, and Hannah's got her St. Ben, St. John. A lot of these monks, like a lot of the monks here, are a lot of fun. This monastery was a ton of young guys, and so Hannah and Piper would exercise with them and bake bread and cook with them. Here I am on the last night saying thank you to them, and then we had, believe it or not, they brought in a stereo system, and we had a dance-off with the monks. And then Hannah had to go home for her brother's wedding and in Minnesota. And so I didn't want Piper to be stepping on her bottom lip that Hannah was back in the States. And so we went to Mauritius, which is an island outside of Africa. And we spent 10 days on this island where I went, here I am kayaking, some things I'd never done in my life. I went kayaking, I was snorkeling, and then imagine that we went scuba diving. In the States, you have to get certified, you have to get trained in, all this stuff. We just showed up, and they take a guy in a wheelchair, and there was no, trial or anything. We get dumped off the boat, puts a regulator in my mouth, and one of the coolest things, I've done, and you'll see, that once I did it, I decided I needed to do it again, of course. So now we went to South Africa. So Hannah came back, we went to South Africa. BBC volunteers haven't been here before. Father Bob Koopman had been here before. But this is what, once you're in the system, once you know how to talk the talk and you know people, you can get into any monastery. And so we just went there by ourselves. I wanted to go to South Africa. This is Nkamana. in South Africa, Benedictine monastery there, where like guys from 10 different countries. Here's the inside of the church. Here we are with some school children. Look how beautiful this is. Another one, you could go there and stay there and have this great kind of spiritual away from everybody experience. They have a school there. You could always volunteer at the school. I love this sister. This was some of these monastics, just like here, they're so full of life. And this young woman, because what it was, she was so young at heart. She met us, talked to us, and then when we're leaving, she runs after the car, runs down the driveway, waving this handkerchief, and she goes, "Greet the whole world for me." I just love this woman. There we are doing shots with the sisters. It's a common Benedictine theme that they make alcohol, and so you go to a lot of these monasteries and they make their own beer and they have bars, and so these sisters made wine out of everything, from carrots to plums to every kind of root, and we're doing shots with the sisters. Here we are at a place called Njombe, where actually a Benedictine sister saw Mother Mary, I think 10 different times over 10 years, and so it's a very holy place, and so they have several rivers that meet there, and they believe if you drink the water or put the water on you, that it has healing powers. Of course, Hannah and Piper wanted to put it on top of my head to see if I grew my hair back. It didn't work. Here's a sister. We spent the 6 months. Now we're at the 6-month part. We're in South Africa on top of Table Mountain. I got to move fast. Then we went to Namibia. A lot of people have probably never heard of Namibia before or thought about going there, but we met so many people along the way that told us such great things about Namibia. Any of you thinking about studying South Africa, you have to put Namibia on your schedule. Besides, you can go to this monastery. This is the Benedictine sisters who were just amazing. And we stayed there for about 2 weeks. See inside the church. It's built into the middle of a mountain. They just dynamited a mountain. And so it's a very unique monastery. We went Christmas caroling with them. Here we are, and these people, this is very impoverished. They live in these tin or metal shacks, and it gets to be like close to 100 degrees. But we went there with the sisters and had a little Christmas caroling. All the sisters put little Santa hats on top of their veils. But, sweet to be there and see the children get so excited, but the poverty was devastating. There's Piper with her St. Ben's shirt. We also then went into the Namibian desert. These are oryx, that could kill you at any time. But somebody had spent 2 years training these things to be comfortable with humans. And we got this close. We had a happy hour, in front of these oryx. But this is one of those things, a bucket list thing, to go into the Namibian desert. You could camp there. We stayed in a little hotel type deal. But this is actually one of the coolest things we did on the whole trip, and we didn't know anything about it. And you have to add this to your bucket list. Here's Piper walking down the thing, and Hannah's doing. Look at this. It's like being on another planet. Always the flags. So then we went to Sri Lanka. This is a Johnny Benny gathering in Sri Lanka, Colombo, Sri Lanka. Piper's mom and stepfather came to visit. These are two more Johnnies, Gabe Hansen and John Litchie, who were BVC volunteers in Sri Lanka and in India. Here's the monastery we stayed in. This would be a great monastery for people to go to because It's in Kandy, Sri Lanka, where it's in a city that you would enjoy a lot, and you could do tourist stuff. And it's a beautiful monastery. In all things, God is glorified. Then, remember that scuba diving that I did that I liked so much? When I came up in the boat, I had never been scuba diving before, and I said, that was amazing. And there was somebody on the boat that had done over 1,000 dives. And I said, is it always like this? He's like, that's the best one of the best I've ever seen. And I said, well, where is better? And he goes, well, the Maldives is probably the best. And so what did I do? Then I had to go to the Maldives. So there we are in the water. Look at that. So Hannah had never been diving before, and so I went diving again. Look at that. Here we are with a local. Piper calling me a loser. The people were so sweet all along the whole trip. So helpful. Look at that. Scuba diving with the flag. And we have a video of it even. So then we went to India. We spent about 2.5 months in India. Went to 7 different cities. And my buddy Jeff Glover came to visit me. Here we are in Delhi. There we were in for Holi. That's when they throw the colored sawdust on you. I'll just say there, a lot of people would probably say, were we ever unsafe or how were we treated? I will say India was the only time that we felt unsafe. On this day in particular, this is Holi, where everybody comes out and throws the sawdust, and everybody told us, do not go out on the streets with women because men will assault them. And we thought, can this really happen? Everybody kept telling us, do not. We went out at about 9:30 in the morning and started walking around, wanted to participate. But by then, men would come up, young men who had been drinking, and they would try to hug Hannah and Piper, and they were letting their hands wander. And it was like everybody had told us this was going to happen. Everybody knew it happens, and you would watch men come up, and older people, other Indian people, would just like yell at them, like telling them right away, don't do it. What they knew they were going to do. And I just have to say, there was another time we were at a beach, and we had to leave because I felt unsafe being there with the ladies. People were so out of control. And so I'd say the way men treat women in India is still very real and terrible. And that was the only time on the trip we really had, we were really afraid, I guess. Taj Mahal. This is a monastery called Kapadu in India. We only stayed there for about a week, but just an amazing monastery. What was so cool about this one is that it's part of a school, and 400 boys go to this school, and they make them all go to Mass. Now, a lot of these children are not Christian. A lot of them are Muslim. A lot of them are Buddhist, but they still all have to go. And so this church not only is a church, but it's also a mosque. And so there's people there praying and saying prayer. At the same time, the Muslims are doing call to prayer. And I thought it was just so unique. And it's all stone. And when you have 400 boys just singing at the top of their lungs, it's amazing. Here was the monastery dining room. Now, this monastery probably had 20, 30 young monks that were joining the monastery. And then there was Hannah and Piper, 2 young ladies. And all the young monks sat on this side, and we sat on this side across from them. And I can say that we only stayed there a week, and I think we were a pretty big distraction, and I was kind of glad that we were getting out of there. And so now we're at a different monastery. This is Asiravan, also in India, and John and Gabe volunteered at 2 different places. There's the church. This is really cool. We're there for Easter. So they do real life Stations of the Cross. And so I couldn't walk around everywhere. It wasn't that accessible. So we just thought we'd meet them at some of the stations at the end. So we're sitting up here by this cross, waiting for them to walk around. And then we say, well, let's go a few more stations down. And we're going down, we meet, this is like a big, all these speakers and people walk up with the playing music. And then we turn around and this guy is up there with like fake blood, scared the hell out of us. And so they take this very seriously. And so this is just a monk acting it out, but pretty intense when you turn around and see that. So it's cool to see how they dress at different places. Here's some sisters here somewhere in the. So anytime we could be of service, we did. You know, the BVCers are all being of service, but they taught some school, Hannah and Piper. A lot of you know Father Jerome. He was here for several years. He's the prior there in Assyrian. The most intense place we went on the whole trip, and I want you to put this on your list as well, Varanasi, India. So I've been to over 50 countries. I've been to some cool places. I've never been to a place more intense than this. Varanasi is the religious capital of India. Imagine we had spent 6 months in Africa, 6 weeks in Sri Lanka, India for 2.5 months. You would think we were pretty third world hardened, that nothing would shock us until we went to Varanasi. This is, so they have these ghats where people go swimming. These are children doing swimming lessons and hanging out. Right up from that, they do the cremations 24 hours a day. These fires are them taking bodies and throwing them on the fires, and they burn them down to their spine and their pelvis. We're in a boat out here, and then a religious person takes those things off the fire, burns it down, and then just throws it in the water in front of you. And that's if you don't die. I think if you die under 10 years old, or you die of leprosy or a snake bite, then they just float you down the river. You don't get cremated. And this again is all about 100 yards away from everybody doing swimming lessons and hanging out. I mean, it is that intense. Here's a little video. So you watch them swing the body up onto the fire. Here it is at night. We ran into some Bennies in Calcutta, you know, at some Bennies that were studying abroad. Then we went to Nepal. This is in Kathmandu, where they had a bad earthquake. Got into some pigeons. Again, they do cremations. You know, St. Benedict would say, keep death before your eyes daily. These people really practice it. You know, people walking around or just walking by cremations. And they just, you'd see people walking by laughing, not even paying attention. They literally keep death before their eyes. I went paragliding, we all did, in Nepal. There's me getting ready to go. Oh, and I'm off. You know, this is one of those things. They kept saying no to me. We kept asking them. They said they weren't going to take me, but we kept at it. Then we went to Myanmar. I wanted to go hot air ballooning in Myanmar. They would not let me do it, but so the ladies still went. I mean, look at this. These are all pagodas, and they're hot air ballooning over that. I would say if you want to go to Myanmar, you got to go in the next few years because you can still climb on the ruins and really experience it. I got to keep going. We went to Egypt. This is where the Arab Spring began. Tahar Park. Of course, got to see the pyramids. Israel, a lot of, you know, it is one of those things that if you are religious at all, I hope you plan to visit Israel. Here we are in Jerusalem, which to understand the history, and you have to go there to experience it. Here it is, call to prayer. Women and men pray on different sides. That's the Wailing Wall. There we are in the Dead Sea where you can float. Look at that. The ladies left me by myself. This is, you go to Jerusalem, go to Israel, go to Jerusalem, but make sure you go to the Sea of Galilee. That, I think, is really true Israel. Here we are at the church where Peter, this is your rock, build a church. The Sea of Galilee there. Here's the rock inside the church. The BVCs are at Tabka. This is the church where this is where the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes is. Here we are where Paul baptized Jesus, or John the Baptist baptized. This is really cool. Those of you who are religious have heard about Jesus, cures the paralyzed man. This is the temple that it happened. And the BVCer is reading from the Bible that passage about Jesus curing the paralyzed guy. And one of the people there was paralyzed and bald. So then we went to Poland. Here's Hungary. We stayed in Pannonhalma. What did I do towards the end? I just started Googling beautiful monasteries around the world. And so this is, some of the outlook there. Some of these so beautiful. And we just call up and say we can stay there. At this point, people weren't even charging us. We'd stay there for free, a lot of these places. Up on a hill. This is, where am I now? Poland, still in Poland. I'm in Warsaw, Poland. This is Pint, another Benedictine monastery. So beautiful, a monk there. Then we, of course, we went to Auschwitz. Extremely intense. Then we went to Belgium. This is Mauritshuis, a beautiful monastery in Belgium. There's our bags. This is the Abbot. They have their own restaurant there, and they make their own beer. Different levels of intensity of alcohol in them. Belgian waffles, more beer. Then, of course, we go to Germany. Here it is, Minden. This is Johnny's. This is where it all started. Minden, Germany. There's this Boniface Wimmer, where he was the abbot, and then he came over to the United States to found St. John's, and Dan Whalen had to leave, but he sends a lot of people on Benedictine heritage tours. There I am, where it all started. So this is Minden. It's a beautiful monastery. Here's the inside of a library. A little known fact that so I am writing a book about all this. I'm about halfway done. Hope to maybe have it done by Christmas and then publish maybe next fall. But a little known fact that I've put into the book already is the number of things St. Benedict talks about, different things. Do you know he talks about reading almost, one of the top 5 things he talks about, the importance of reading. And so most of these monasteries will have a library. Now for you Bennies, here we are at Eichstätt. This is St. Walburg Abbey. This is where St. Ben's began. They still keep very traditional there. And so we visited there, stayed there for some. This is their church. Ironically enough, the one place on the trip that the women would not let me pray with them. There were a few places where the men said, never that they wouldn't let the ladies pray with them, but maybe they wouldn't let them come into the monastery. But at this one at St. Ben's, at Eichstätt, they would not let me come pray with the ladies. They made me stay downstairs, and Piper and Hannah went and prayed with them. And we happened to run into a Johnny who was studying. They saw a guy with a Minnesota shirt on. It turns out he was a Johnny. This is a monastery, St. Ottilian, Tutzing Sisters. We're getting close to being done. Here we're in Austria. Hannah's parents did visit. Stayed in a monastery called Gottwig in Austria. Another one, just Google beautiful monasteries. And now here we are in our last country, Italy. And this is at San Anselmo, a monastery where a lot of monks from around the world come, and BVC have volunteers there. This is Nate Anderson. And that's Hannah's brother, who's a Johnny. And there we are at St. Peter's in Rome. Look at that. You would think that's photoshopped or something like that. That's how close we were to the Pope. He was doing a mass, and Piper took that picture. I'm right beside her. Look at this picture. There I am. There's, you know. So we got that close to the Pope. Here we are at Subiaco. This is where St. Benedict was a hermit for 3 years. And so we visited that. It's a beautiful monastery. Here's the inside. So it was a cave when he was there as a hermit. And then our final monastery was Monte Cassino, where St. Benedict built his largest church and where he was an abbot, and where he branched out from there. Of course, we have to do the flags there. We stayed with Benedictine sisters in Rome at their monastery. These are Tutzing Sisters. It's a congregation. We stayed with them. And our final stop was in Venice, because even though I had traveled to 50 countries, the first time I ever thought about leaving the United States, it was actually Father Tim Backus that said, "I don't think you should go to Europe. I think it's a mistake. I don't think somebody in a wheelchair should do that." This was in 1997. Timo had said, "I studied in Rome. I don't think you should go to Rome." And everybody said, if nothing else, never go to Venice. It's a city, built on water. And so I traveled all these places. And so for my birth, this is a Johnny we met in Venice. And so how did I celebrate my birthday? Onagana. And that is it. So we have questions. Do we have them?
Does anybody have any specific questions for Bob? I was going to say, if not,
We haven't read.
we have one.
Do you want to? We can hear you, Steve, probably. You're loud. Yeah.
Okay. I have two questions, actually. One is, how did you decide which countries to go to, and how did you travel from country to country?
So the first question was, how did Bob decide which countries to visit, and then how did he travel from country to country?
So as far as originally, it was with Brother Paul, knowing that I could go to BVC sites, or at least thinking I could. What's ironic about Rome is that the first place I thought it was going to begin in Rome at San Anselmo, and they actually said no. We don't think we can accommodate somebody in a wheelchair. And so Brother Paul, and I didn't know where I would go, and really in some respects, if anybody was going to take me. As I mentioned about the perception of people with disabilities throughout the world, people were very hesitant to have somebody in a wheelchair come there. And actually we sent letters to multiple monasteries, seeing if I could come. The first monastery that said yes was the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And so we were actually planning to go to the DRC, And so the trip started out, like I said, I was going to 12 countries. The DRC was one of those. We actually went to the embassy, the DRC embassy in Tanzania, and literally got laughed out of there. The guy said, "We're not letting you in. We're not letting any Americans in." And so I've written about it in the book, but after a while, it was what countries can we get into without having to send back our passports to get visas. But it was mostly Benedictine volunteer course sites. And then I should say that the trip was going so well, and Hannah and Piper couldn't be here tonight. They will be here this weekend, tomorrow. But I had these two women, these two bennies, that were treating me so well, and it's the best I've ever been treated in my whole life. And I was enjoying it so much, and I wanted to reward them. Things I've always wanted to do. Did I always want to go to Egypt? Did I, once we heard about the Maldives, some of these other things, to go to Nepal, I wanted to reward them with those things. And at the same time, I wanted to see these things, and who better to go with than two people who were treating me so well. So the trip took on a life of its own because I just felt I wanted to do so much for these two people who were treating me so well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've answered it through that question. It's just in your book, are you addressing the disability advocacy work that you're doing as you travel into each of these countries, that you're not just going as a tourist, you're going as a disability advocate.
Right.
And that's what I
And
really
yes,
like to
we talk about, I'll talk about it in the book, but it is, some people will say just showing up is enough, maybe. These people didn't see me, as anything other than an invalid. And even some of these people we would meet and spend time with, Brother Dominic, this one monk in Tanzania. I traveled with him for 10 hours, in a car, and then traveled back with him. So 20 hours with him in a car. At one point, he told Hannah and Piper, you guys are so great to take care of him. And of course, you're going to have to take care of him his whole life. And they're like, the hell we are. But, he did say to them, he's like, of course he could never work, and no one would ever love him, And Brother Stani was the same way. He kept telling them, I'm surprised he's so intelligent that he can speak so well. This guy was a doctor. But, those overcoming those kind of prejudices and the way, people interacted with me by being out there, meeting people, we tried our best. And I should say, by the way, when I was picking these two people, Hannah wanted to go in and help people with disabilities. She's now working at Gillette in the cities, helping children with disabilities. Piper's in physical therapy school. Piper also has 3 brothers. 2 brothers are disabled. One has a severe head injury, and one is a paraplegic. They were hit when they were children by a drunk driver, and so Piper, not only has brothers who are disabled, but that's what she wants to do with her life, and so, that's something they were passionate about as well. We volunteered at a lot of Mother Teresa places where they have children with disabilities. Next question.
Well, Professor Bell will be up here too.
Let me just say one last thing. I want to write about it in the book and do it justice, but the Rule of St. Benedict really he wrote it about monasteries and how to keep a community together. And so that was why he was so unique. He was the one that created these ideas of monasteries, where people aren't just wandering around the world, they're staying put. And how are they going to get along? And I can tell you, I read the Rule of St. Benedict about 4 or 5 times. I thought about it a lot. I tried to personalize it. And in the end, I was keeping together, a monastery of 3. I had a community of 3. And I've traveled, a lot. And I've traveled with caregivers. And usually when it's over, we don't like each other, it's hard to do. We traveled together for a year, and I told Hannah and Piper before it began, I want to be able to dance at your wedding when this is over. And, you know, we, of course, had some, you know, times where we were angry with each other or frustrated, but we ended it, you know, all tremendous friends, very close, and it was really practicing, you know, listening, the rule of the same thing, listening, restraint of speech, you know, treat others the way you want to be treated, accepting others. And so I can say, and they would actually have to agree with this, I spent a year really not criticizing them. And for those people that know me well, it's that Bob's kind of a critical guy. But I accepted them for who they are. I never criticized them. Maybe if they were things we needed to do for them to be a better caregiver, but the way we were able to get along by me just accepting them for who they are, I think made a huge difference. Now, did they let me know all of my faults over the year? You know, I became very aware of all my faults, but I can tell you it kept the peace by not being critical of them. So I'll let you wrap it up, Quinlan, but
I want to give one more huge round of applause to this amazing and inspirational figure. You know, if you can't emulate his travel, at least try to emulate his style, because I also think it's unparalleled. So thank you everybody to coming to our first Politics in a Pint. I want to give a shameless plug to the 12th annual Eugene McCarthy Lecture, which is Monday, October 15th at 7:30 in the Abbey Church. We will have former Chief of Staff to President Barack Obama, Dennis McDonough, as our primary speaker. Tickets can be found online through Fine Arts Programming at the CSD-SJU website. And then finally, the November midterms are coming up on November 6th, and we have a newly formed voting information booth outside the pub as you leave if anybody has any questions about voting. And you can also check out our new voting resources website that we have linked to the McCarthy Center website. So get out and vote because it's very important. So thank you everybody for coming. Have a great night.